Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. I will present to you a brief introduction to the Museum of Industry, because I suppose not everyone knows our museum and what it is about. And after that, I will present to you 3 case studies in which you can see what we do as a museum to expand our public and our museum community, and to make industrial heritage attractive to a bigger public, for example, tourists. I will talk a bit more slowly, so it's easier for the interpreters. So, a short introduction to the Museum of Industry. We are, in fact, situated in an old textile factory building, a former cotton mill to be more specific, and we consider our museum building as one of our main collection items and a true lieu de mémoire. When you see and enter the historical building, you can really feel the history of the place, and you can even smell the oil of the machinery who was once inside. We have 3 permanent exhibitions and 1 or 2 temporary exhibitions each year, all about specific parts of our industrial heritage. Now, with the permanent museum exhibitions, we try to bring back the industrial past to life. We are not only a museum where you can see and hear objects and stories, but we are also a living museum with working spaces, a lot of activities and demonstrations for the public. So our main exhibition is about people and machinery, and it shows how machines changed the world around us since the 17th century. In this exhibition, you can see our 2 museum objects who are recognized as Flemish masterpieces. The oldest preserved wine mill in Europe and our Muljenny. This exhibition, as you can see on the pictures, is very interactive. We have different characters in different time periods who each tell a story about their working lives and their working conditions. Now, on this museum floor, we also have different machines which our visitors can activate. On the images, for example, you can see one of our steam engines who is activated by pushing on the button. It's a real favorite for our youngest visitors. And the picture on the right shows the Tinker Studio we have on this exhibition. In this studio, we encourage people to work with their hands and to make something out of all different materials that are present there. Learning by doing is one of the main principles of our Tinker Studio. So our second permanent exhibition is one of the 2 working departments of the museum, with machines who are still working and who are being demonstrated for visitors. The printing department actually gives an overview of the printing industry from 1750 until nowadays. It is not only an exhibition, but also a makerspace. People still work with the old techniques and the printing presses, and visitors can attend workshops and master classes on printing techniques. For children, we created a mini-zine to use during their visits. It's in fact a little paper they can use. They can print their name on it, and they can use it during their visits to the printing department to test different printing techniques. At the end of the visit, they go home with a little book or mini-zine they created themselves. Here are some pictures of our printing department. And then our 3rd permanent exhibition is our textile department. Here visitors get to know how textile is made. We show the whole production process from the cotton plant until the finished towel. We also make the link with today. For example, high-tech textiles and themes like the climate are discussed on this floor. Also, this museum floor is better like this. Okay. Also, this museum floor is also a makerspace. The spinning machines and the looms are still working, and they are weaving fabrics, which we use in the museum to sell in our product shop. We also organize workshops on different textile techniques. Here's some pictures of the textile department. Children who follow a workshop on felting. and my colleague from the textile department who was explaining the operation of one of our textile machines to students in textile design. So that was a brief introduction to the museum. Now I will start with the 3 case studies. Now the first case study I would like to present to you are in fact 2 examples of methodologies that we use in the museum to collect more information about our museum collection with the help of the public. We noticed that by asking people to provide information about the museum collection, we can build a specific connection with the audience. And it helps us to enlarge the community around the museum and to reach a wider public. The first example is the organization of meeting days in the museum. So in the museum collection, we collect lots of stories by oral history. That means that we interview people from different backgrounds about their work and their lives in and around the factory. The interviews are added to the museum collection and are made accessible for researchers. From some of the witnesses, we made short movies, as you can see in the picture, which are displayed in the museum collection or which are accessible by the museum websites. In that way, we can not only enrich We can not only enrich our collection, but we can also, it's better like this, okay. But we can also show different views and different perspectives on the industrial heritage. Factory managers, for example, have a whole different story than factory workers. Now, in 2019 and in 2020, we renewed our textile and printing department. And to represent a multi-perspective story and different voices in the new museum presentation, we organized 2 meeting days in the museum. One for people who used to work in the graphic industry and one for people who used to work in the textile industry. Now, during these meeting days, we invite current and former employees from a particular industry to share their memories with the museum. We invite them to bring objects, to bring their stories that relate to their working lives. And then in the museum itself, we provide a scan post to register their materials and a chat box where they can share their stories by being interviewed by one of the museum members. Now, apart from the memories and the objects that the people bring to the museum, there's also an important social factor during these days. Former workmates, for example, see each other again. They talk about the past days. We also provide always coffee and cake, which is very important during these days, and a lot of opportunity to catch up and to get to know each other. Afterwards, the participants receive a group picture sent home, and we will continue to keep them informed about the museum activities and about what will happen to their stories and their objects. In this way, we try to increase the community around the museum with people who are really represented in the museum. Now, by organizing these meeting days, the museum story and the museum collection, on one hand, they are academical, but on the other hand, they are inspired by the little stories of people who worked in the factories. And it's a good fusion to have them both. Now, here are a few pictures from our meeting days that show a bit how we work. You can see a former employee from a printing company being interviewed by the museum, and on the right side you can see someone who brought documents and more objects, and they are instantly being scanned by the museum team. Now, here are 2 pictures that show more or less the social factor during the meeting days. A group picture from the meeting day on the textile industry. As you can see, a lot of happy faces on the picture. And on the right side, you can see in the middle, Baki, who is one of our museum workers who demonstrates our textile machines. In between 2 of his former colleagues, he met again on...
Et alors, il était avec 2 des collègues qu'il avait rencontrés lors des journées de réunion. J'ai sélectionné ces 2 photos pour vous montrer que ces journées de réunion ont également vocation à faire les gens se rencontrer et créer des liens avec le musée. Alors, le deuxième exemple de la manière dont on enrichit notre collection avec l'aide du public, c'est en organisant ce qu'on appelle des cafés wiki au sein du musée. Il y a beaucoup d'informations sur les collections du musée, des sujets connexes, qui sont toujours méconnus du public. C'est vraiment des connaissances entre les mains des personnes qui ont travaillé pour le musée, ou alors des chercheurs, des étudiants qui sont passionnés par ce patrimoine. Et donc on veut recueillir ces connaissances et ces histoires sur les sujets qui ont trait au musée et les partager sur Wikipédia. Donc voilà, ces infos sont alors...
They can add extra information to it, or they can in turn reuse the articles for their own research. Now, during such wiki cafés, interested people come together in the museum to share their knowledge with each other and to post it online. Each writing session zooms in on a different topic of the museum collection, and we are always there, the museum team, together with some Wikipedia volunteers, to support the people who are there and to write also articles ourselves about the museum collection. Here again, some pictures of our latest Wiki Café a few weeks ago. Then we came together to write articles about a former construction company in Ghent named Serk. And a few relatives of the family of Serk who heard about the Wiki Café came to join us. They provided very useful information about the topics, and they also had a great evening. So here again, we have on the one hand the goal of enriching our collection with data and information, and on the other hand, the social aspect of bringing people back together around industrial heritage. So next, the museum as a makerspace. As I already told you in the introduction, our textile and our printing departments are not only exhibition spaces, but also maker spaces. And with those maker spaces, we try to reach a new public of makers, artists and students who work with textile and printing techniques. Now, let's start with the beginning. What do we define as a makerspace in general? Now, maker spaces are in fact shared spaces where machinery and working materials are available for different people to use. The idea is in that way that the machinery, which is otherwise quite expensive for artists to buy themselves, is shared, and then maybe the most important thing, by meeting other makers, you are inspired for your own work, you can exchange knowledge and practices, and you can inspire other makers. Now, maker spaces encourage skills like hands-on learning. They can help with critical thinking skills, and they can boost the confidence of the makers themselves. Nowadays, you can see maker spaces in schools and libraries and public places and so on. Now, of course, our maker space in the Museum of Industry, here the museum collection is, of course, always a starting point. We have a focus on textile and on printing techniques, and we offer a combination of both historical and contemporary machines, which both have a place in our museum collection. The setting within the museum presentation itself is quite exceptional, of course, and the idea is that the museum collection inspires and stimulates new ideas and knowledge, and in that way it has a contemporary relevance. Now we see it as a real dialogue with the makers. On one hand, the museum collection can inspire makers to create something new, but equally, on the other hand, the ideas of makers can encourage the museum to try something completely new with the old machines, or to look at something at different angles we didn't think of before. So during the past years, in the museum, we already created some of what we call basics for makers with an interest in textile and printing techniques. Since many years, we can count on a group of volunteers who demonstrate the machines for the museum visitors. We also organize workshops, and there are different interactions in the museum where visitors can print or make something themselves. We also have our Tinker Studio, which is an open makerspace filled with materials people can use to create something out of their own creativity, without any guidelines. Now, the new thing for us and for our museum is that since 2 years now, we made our machines available to makers outside the museum context. For example, students or artists. They can hire one of our textile machines, for example, and they can experiment with new textile designs on it. Now, as a museum that works with historical techniques and machines, of course, we support heritage communities around intangible techniques and traditions of industrial history, because we want to safeguard this heritage and we want to encourage the transfer of knowledge between generations. From that idea, we are trying to really build a living museum, and for textiles and printing, the main focus is on the transfer and on the relaunch of those techniques. An active community of professionals and of volunteers puts this into practice like every day in the museum. We see them as living carriers and they pass on the heritage to new generations. Here's some pictures that illustrate our maker spaces. On the picture you can see our TC2, which is a digital weaving loom from around 2020. It can be used by makers or students to experiment with new designs in the textile departments. And you can see two designers working on it on the picture. Then two pictures from an artist in residence project where we launched an open call for artists to get to work in our textile departments. So that was the museum as a makerspace. Now we came to the last case of my presentation, our activities outside the museum walls. Now we believe it is important that industrial heritage gets the attention it deserves, that it is being appreciated in a way like, for example, a work of art is appreciated. And to achieve that goal, we also collaborate on projects outside the museum walls. I brought some examples of projects where we try to make industrial heritage known to a wide audience in public spaces. So in the past year, we issued several walking and cycling maps for tourists in Ghent around industrial heritage. I have some of the maps with me, so if you're interested, just ask me for one. The maps are available in 3 languages, and they are available free of charge at the museum reception and in the Ghent City Tourist Office. On these maps, we provide information not only about industrial heritage, but also about things like urban renewal, nice places to eat and drink, playgrounds, or spots where tourists can take photographs. So this extra information makes the maps a real tourist product. At this moment, we are preparing a new walking map around the old docks and harbour of Ghent, a part of the city which is currently being redeveloped. Now, in addition to maps with a quite obvious industrial heritage, this year we also issued a map along power boxes near the museum. We noticed that many of these boxes look somewhat neglected, and we knew that there was a lot of attention for street art in Ghent. So we contacted our culture department with the idea of doing something with the power boxes that was related to the museum collection. They were, from the start, very enthusiastic about the idea, so a new map was born. We contacted 10 artists, and each of them provided a work of art for the power boxes. And the special thing was that the work of art was inspired by the museum collection on electricity and on light. Now, in the maps, they are walking maps, but we also give more information about the artists, about the works of art, and of course, about the items that inspired the artists. Then the last example of working outside the museum walls in 2021, a former gas holder site in Ghent, which is called Tom de Lier, was renewed, and the Museum of Industry was contacted by the city to make the history of the site accessible to a wider audience and to the neighborhood. To do that, we worked together with an agency and we created information panels on viewers on the site that tell more about the history of the gas holders. Of course, on those panels, we don't have a lot of place to put everything we want, so we worked with the Heritage app to provide extra information to those who are interested, and they can look at it with QR codes. Here are some examples of the panels and the viewers on the site. And then I came to the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention.